Welcome back to the Beyond the Bucket Show. We've got a superstar in the making in the sports broadcasting and media industry. Jenny Fischer, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, we got connected on LinkedIn, and I just really appreciated the story that you shared. And I shared that entire story with my team. It was with your time with the NCAA. Tell me a little bit about that story and just kind of how it's developed and just what your process was.
Yeah, well, and something that's funny about it is there's even kind of like a backstory to that story. The reason I even applied for that job was someone I didn't know DM'd me on Twitter and was like, hey, I've seen the stuff that you do and I think you should apply for this. And so I was like, oh, like, okay, why wouldn't I, the NCAA, that's pretty cool. And it seemed like something I could see myself doing. And so wound up applying, and it was like a pool of thousands of applicants for a handful of positions, and it got down to the last two. I went in for the in-person interviews, and they flew me out to Indy, and then found out that I did not get the job, got the phone call, found out that they were hiring on their extern at the time, so I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then, they gave me the call back. The guy who actually had called me ended up being my boss, who was just absolutely incredible. And basically in the post I said I felt like a bench player because I was the second choice, and they called me back, and I remember I went to my dad and I was like, I hate feeling like the second choice, the bench player, and he was like, no, like this is where you prove to them you're not. And so spent the past year there, just wrapped up my time at the NCAA, and I just was filled with gratitude. I mean, opportunities come and go, and it's kind of what you make of them and how you make the most of what you're given in order to come out with something great.
I just really appreciate that, especially, I coach girls basketball, and being that is the case, so many times people want something and maybe they don't get it right away. And so just understanding that mindset to prove yourself over and over again because you didn't get what you want is really what it's ultimately about at the end of the day. And, I just really appreciated that. It resonated so well with myself, and not only myself, but my players as well. So it was just really cool. And I just really appreciate your mindset on that.
No, thank you. And something that I've loved that came out of it is, well, first of all, it kind of like blew up a little bit. It has over like 2 million views now on LinkedIn, which I'm not like savvy on LinkedIn social metrics and stuff like that, but I was like, that's kind of crazy. And just reading through the comments that people had has even like shifted my perspective. Like one person was like, you wouldn't have starters without bench players. And I was like, that's a really great thing. And people bring up Michael Jordan, Tom Brady. I'm like, okay, this is kind of just crazy to think about it in those terms, but that's kind of the beauty of sports, I guess. Like it really parallels into life.
Right, definitely. I always try to tell everybody, start in your current role. So be the best version of yourself in that role, and then you can still work on the things that you need to improve on. And that goes for really any walk of life. So, I think that's great advice for anybody out there, just seeking different chances to be seen or heard, or show what they're really good at. But it's not going to come easy. Tell me about your work ethic, because you grew up in Wisconsin, and you've got a very strong backbone as far as your family is concerned. I believe your siblings were collegiate athletes as well. So tell me a little bit about how you grew up.
Yeah, so I was the youngest of 3 kids, and something that just makes my story come full circle that I tell people all the time is that both my mom and dad played basketball at Marquette. And so that's how they met. They settled down in a suburb of Milwaukee right after they got married, and that's where my 3 siblings and I grew up. Grew up in a high school where I played basketball, volleyball, and lacrosse, and was just extremely involved. Like sports was just always in the fabric of it. Even like playing, going to Marquette basketball camps. My older brother and I would go, and now he has pictures with like Travis Diener while he's wearing like, I don't know, like goofy little middle schooler clothes with like puka shell necklaces, whatever it is. And It's just funny to look back and be like, Marquette basketball was even a part of it from when we were kids. And so honestly, I grew up just kind of in a family where basketball meant a lot, and where being there for each other meant a lot. And you mentioned the hard work, like my mom was an accountant, my dad was an engineer, and they had a kid who wanted to go into like journalism and writing, and like I would write books for them when I was a kid. And it's just I felt like really supported, and I was also like raised by two people who were social butterflies, is how I like to word it. Like
Yeah.
they always had people over, and they were always like trying to host, and like they were always so friendly, like even at basketball games. And like my grandparents were around. My mom's two parents lived close by, and so like they were always at our basketball games. And it was just like that feeling of support. And then also, like I mentioned, like the social butterfly, talking to people, getting to know people. And I think like just being around adults and like having like that curious nature for me was like, ooh, they're having people over, I want to go talk to them. And like people would be like, what is this like 7-year-old girl like doing walking up to the adults? So I'm just grateful for where I grew up, where I was raised. I mean, I also don't think if I would have lived anywhere outside of Wisconsin, I don't know if I would have wound up at Marquette. If I would have, I mean, I still probably would have grown up glorifying that place and Marquette basketball, but it led me to kind of want to go there and have an inkling to, you know, kind of in my own way follow in my parents' footsteps. And so for that, I'm again just like grateful. It's like a reoccurring theme for me, but I wouldn't be who I am without all of it.
For sure. Who is your favorite Marquette athlete outside of your parents?
Oh, that's a good. I'm glad you said that because sometimes I feel like I have to pick them. I'm like a sucker for Dwayne Wade. Like grew up watching him, and then it came full circle again when I was a senior at Marquette. Was when he had his he called it The Last Dance, actually, which is ironic that that's the documentary for
Yeah.
Michael Jordan. But it was his last season in the NBA, and he stopped by Marquette, and my job was to literally follow him around for like our Marquette basketball social media stuff and
Wow.
take pictures of him, post stuff that he was doing. And at the end, I was like, "Hey, can we get a picture together?" He was like, "Of course, I don't care." And I was like, "This is great." Like, you know, when you're like idols, like I don't know if you ever get to meet them, you're like, "Oh, what are they actually going to be like?" I was like, Dwayne Wade is just a really, really nice guy. And so,
Right. Wow, that's awesome. Dwayne Wade is one of my favorites. Just the way he carries himself, his charismatic nature, and just he feels welcoming to everybody, you know. And I'm sure you felt the same way. But tell me a little bit about your time at Marquette. You know, it's a beautiful school, beautiful campus. So many great media broadcasters have come through there. I believe Al McGuire is one of the main people that are recognized by that department. Tell me about your time at Marquette.
yeah, so that place is a basketball school to like the highest degree. Like
Hmm.
everything revolves around basketball. So for a basketball nut like me, a hoops head, that was the perfect place for me to learn and grow and be around something that I was passionate about. And I think it really wove in well to the sports media aspect because you have a good basketball team on both the men's and women's side too, I'll add, because when I was there, there were five women all starters on the women's team who, by the time that they graduated, they each had at least 1,000 points, and one player had 2,000 points. The only Marquette player between men's and women's to have 2,000 points, and of course, Marcus Howard surpassed it this past year, but she was the first to hit it. And so things like that, where it was like, dang, like I get to be immersed into all of this. I get to tell the stories around it. And obviously it's so much easier when you have a winning program or like great people to work around. But that's what I really enjoyed out of my collegiate experience is like some people attended the games as fans, and I was like, I get the really cool perspective of being kind of on the inside and getting to tell those stories. And like I said, just be around those people. And so when I think back at my time there, that was definitely the highlight, getting to work with them. I even like traveled with the women's team. They got to charter. So I was like, this is so cool. I'm going on a plane and we're flying over. Like we went to Xavier and Butler was one road swing that I remember. And just getting to do that was really cool. I would also go to the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden every year. And like I said, just grateful because like, who would have ever thought? Definitely not me. So Marquette's a really special place. And then I think about the professors, I think about even the coaches. Like I still talk to Carolyn Keeger, who she's no longer at Marquette as the head coach. She's at Penn State, but we just were texting last week. And so still being connected to those people. And like I said, the basketball part doesn't hurt.
What have you taken away from each one of the basketball programs, the men's and women's, just as far as, as you progress your career?
Yeah, do you mean just in terms of like lessons I've learned?
Yeah, just lessons you learn, whether it be, the work ethic that it takes to be a successful program or a successful individual. What sort of, I would say life hacks did you learn from, being around such great people and organizations?
Yeah, well, I love that the life hacks part because I think especially like it just goes to show that if you have good people who buy in, the amount of growth that you can see is insane. I mean, like I said, like came in with all five of those women who ended up being starters and then they all left with like 1,000+ points. It's like how often do you have a starting five with 1,000 points in their career? And
Right.
one of them plays in the WNBA now. Things like that where, and I think this is an undersold part of sports as a whole is the growth metric, right? Like how people like when they first started, what they were like, we all look at like the one and done, they were the number one overall pick. And
Right.
yes, there's growth in that even from middle school, high school and beyond. It's like, what about from when you think they've reached their peak to even more?
Right.
Like those people that have that like separate level. And I think I especially saw that like with Marcus Howard. I mean, everyone knew he was a shooter when he came in, and you obviously have big shoes to fill when people claim you in that way. But for me it was like, okay, like I literally had to look at stats and figure out storylines and write articles and do things like that, and looking at just like how much he actually grew. And like you can always put it to like, okay, that he had the ball in his hands more, like they shifted where he was taking the ball up the court at one point, and it's like, yeah, like that can maybe make a difference, but at the same time, like just people undersell growth, I think.
Right.
And it's really evident when you're around people that you see the full scope of like 4 years or whatever the timetable may be.
Speaking of growth, you've kind of done a lot of things in a short period of time. And, just researching you for this piece, you've interned at a lot of different places. You put yourselves in positions where people can see you and get your name out there. Tell me what that process was like and how you continue to build off of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like ask me, how did you get those internships? And I was like, honestly, like I applied, I tried to connect with people, and this is my big thing too, right? You connect with people to build relationships, not to gain some sort of end goal. Like, I don't know, you don't
Bingo.
use them as a means. And so for me, like, that's genuinely how I took it every time. And like, I had a mentor, his name's Brian Anderson. He does games for March Madness, he does Brewers, he does a lot of different stuff. And he knew me since I was like 13 years old. And so when I was coming into Marquette, he was like, hey, I think you should pick a journalism major instead of, I was debating between that and digital media. He was like, make that your minor, but make journalism your major so that you have storytelling at the forefront because you're talented at it. And I
Right.
said, okay, I trust you. I think that's great. Sounds good. And then at the end of my freshman year, he's like, hey, I think you should apply for this internship. And I was like, I have no experience. And he's like, you just took a year's worth of classes. What do you mean? And so
Right.
someone who was like, no, like you can do these things, and I know you and I want to help you because I believe in you. And I think that's the biggest thing too, like finding people who are in your corner and who genuinely want to act to help you
Right.
is something that I feel indebted for, because like why else would someone be willing to give me a recommendation or whatever. And so for me, I think just it went from like one internship to another. And another thing that I like realized is like, hey, like I'm inclined towards the Big East because I know Marquette is a part of that and I get to go to the tournament. And so like, why not try to do more stuff with them and utilize some people who know people there? And then that turned into, hey, the Big East is, they have a contract with Fox Sports. That'd be really cool to get that angle. So let me try to get to Fox Sports in New York. And that was the internship I had going into my senior year. And it was incredible. Like living in New York for 3 months alone was really cool, but like getting to be around, it was at the time where Ice Cube's like the Big Three tournament was
Oh,
like
yeah.
really starting to like gain traction. And so like I got to go to that, and like again, where it's like this gratitude of just like I don't deserve to be here. I'm working my butt off to make sure like am showing people I do. But like deep down, it's not even like an insecure thing. It's just like you treat this like you had an empty slate and now you have so many things that have filled it. And like how else, like what do you do with that? You just make sure that you do it justice by the people who helped you get there. So I mean, the internships were, I think I ended up doing like 7 or 8 of them, to be honest. And that's like on top of like having a job and things like that. So I think the growth, it's just like, even when I look at where I was when I got into the NCAA, I'm like, I didn't know half the things I know now. I feel like that's another aspect. You're just like constantly learning, you're figuring out what more don't I know, what more can I be better at? And it's just, the journey is the best part, which I know is a little cliche, but
Mhm.
you're just figuring it all out as you go. And you're, like I said, trying to do the best that you can.
Right. Several things that you said that I want to touch on. One would be never turn down an opportunity. I think when when your mentor came to you and said, "Hey, try this out," oh, I'm not ready, but you didn't necessarily skip any steps. You paved the way by taking the classes, getting yourself educated on whatever you needed to. So no, you're not going to be initially ready for it, but you never are. An assistant coach going to the WNBA or NBA and taking over a head coaching role, they're not ready for it. I wasn't ready for any of the roles that I've had. The same thing goes for you, but you learn and you just don't skip steps. If you don't skip steps, it'll end up working out for you. And just always have that hunger and that thirst to learn. And I really appreciate those things that you just said. Um, Pivoting just a little bit, the NCAA. You spent 1 year with them, and you know they've got a track record that may be uh, checkered for a lot of people. But tell me about your experience when you were there.
Yeah, so I think when I came in, I was like, I don't even know what I think of this organization at the time, and in the most respectful way, right? I was like, I'm seeing on the news all this NIL stuff, how, and you look on social media and you'll see people bashing the NCAA, and I'm just like, you know what? Like, what I know is that they're collegiate athletics, they're the association, it's the national office. I was like, I'm going to pay attention to the fact that they have over 1,000 membership schools, and they have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands more than likely of student athletes, where it's like, it's about them and it's about the sports and it's about young people and helping grow them. And so that was a mission I could get behind. And then once I actually got in the doors, it's an organization of 500 people. And so, like, it's these two massive buildings. I remember being like, this place is crazy. Like, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things that I don't even think people realize. So for me, it was it was a really eye-opening experience to get the internal aspect of what the NCAA is and does, even from like a rules and regulations aspect, which was not my department, right? But I'm learning about how these things work, how rules get passed, how committees, decide things, which again is something I think that high schoolers and even current college athletes don't fully understand. They know bits and pieces about the NCAA, what they do, and how it might affect them. And so for me, I mean, I'm just grateful for my time there. They literally let me travel the country and tell stories that meant a great deal to me. And they were a part of a national narrative in women's college basketball. And so I just feel, again, grateful. I know I keep repeating that, but like, I just feel lucky to have been there because, again, like I said, I just learned so much. And getting to be around those people shows you that although there is some bad PR and some things that maybe people don't understand or they're quick to judge, like, I think about all the time the NBA rule that people think is an NCAA rule about the one and done. Like, that's not the NCAA trying to protect that. That's the NBA saying, no, 1 year in college, then you can come. And so things like that, where I'm like, I don't think people fully understand that it is a membership led organization. And I'm not just standing up for them because they cut me a paycheck for the last year. It's genuinely, they want to do what's best for the membership and reflect what they're thinking and feeling. And I feel like they need to do a better job of educating people on exactly what's going on in that building and what they're trying to do. But at the same time, I'm lucky that I got the internal aspect of, I know that, they care about student athletes and they care about telling their stories.
So would you say, the upper echelon, like the one percenters of the, collegiate arena, and particularly in the three, major sports, um, basketball on the men's and women's side, football, and then I guess you can throw baseball in there and softball. Um, do you think those one percenters are the reason why the NCAA has that sort of that sort of, tenor about them, about, we're trying to hold these individuals back from, going on to the professional ranks, and that you mentioned the one and done rule. However, there's some, female athletes on the girls basketball or the women's basketball side that are leaving college early after their junior year or something like that. And then baseball, you've got to go, if you decide to go to college, you got to stay there for 3 years. So do you think it's more of the 1% athlete is being held back and that's what the public sees? Or do you think they kind of get a bad rap because of those elite athletes? They have some constraints.
Yeah, I think it's the high profile cases that get the most notoriety, right? It's like, oh, Trevor Lawrence was trying to raise money for a GoFundMe for this, and then it got shut down by the NCAA. And it's like, no, actually, their athletic department shut it down because they didn't know the compliance rules, had to call for clarity, in which we allowed it. And so it's just like interesting aspects like that. But like you mentioned, like holding them back, I mean, they're the ones that can easily go pro and make a lot of money, especially if we're talking name, image, and likeness. Like, look at Zion Williamson, for example, 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
They're saying he could have made like $500,000 easy, like for Duke in his 1 year there. And like, that's probably the minimum, right? And the whole shoe exploding incident with his deal, and people are like, is he still going to go Nike? And there's just so many outside factors, which I think is also hard for the NCAA, who, like, you think about, like, came into existence like 100-ish years ago, and just how much things have changed. There weren't brand endorsements. There weren't these things that we have now. There wasn't social media and all the different, like, it almost feels like we're in an echo chamber sometimes of, like, student athletes nowadays have so much going on and so much to balance. And I mean, my hat is off to them because it's just tough. And so I think the NCAA gets a bad rap, but I know at the same time, like I said, they're trying to change, and I think they actually will adapt NIL. I think it's going to look different than people think. I mean, right now I think they have a timetable for like 2021, but it's going to change the landscape of collegiate athletics, and it's going to look different than people I think maybe wanted it to at in the traditional sense, but it'll be for the better.
Do you think the athletes should receive scholarships and be able to use their likeness, to help, bring money in?
That's a great question. And that's another hot topic. It's like me, I was just a normal student at Marquette. And if I wanted to go make money off of my name, image, and likeness, that would have been okay. But as soon as a basketball player is reached out to by someone, they have to say, oh, no, I can't. And so it's we're talking about this right now with getting back on campuses. They're like, we can't tell football players that they can get back on campus, and then normal students, it's not safe for them to go back on campus. They can't have a higher standard just because they are a student athlete. They are a student first, and that should be the baseline and how they're treated. And so, but it's clearly not that way. And so we're in this sticky spot where you realize student athletes, especially that upper echelon, that top 1%, make money for these universities to keep their lights on, and they have budgeted accordingly. So I don't know. I mean, I truly think they should be able to, because like I said, if a normal student, if someone like you or me walking around a campus can go and do that and they can't, it seems almost unfair to be a student athlete.
Right. With the social climate the way it is, and just being around different coaches throughout your time period, do you think people should be coming out and speaking their voice, on these social topics? Because it is really such a hot button. And I would almost say that it's almost getting popularized by a lot of people. I feel that, some people may not even be genuine, but for the coaches that may not be speaking out, do you have any response to them?
I think this is another great question, because the traditional, and this is such a PR tactic as well, the traditional way in PR is if something bad is happening, stay silent. Like, you know what, we don't have to come out with a statement. It doesn't regard us. It doesn't have to do with us. When you're talking about human life, it does have to do with us. And I think that is, again, the baseline. And I just mentioned the term echo chamber for student athletes. Like, this kind of feels like an echo chamber at times of like, and we're in this sticky area of, do they mean it? Are they just putting out a statement to put out a statement? Like, I loved what the Clippers did. They put out a video, and it was like the purest form of storytelling that you could have done rather than a statement. And it was talking about, here's what happened while we were away. And it was narrated by Paul George, and it was just incredible. And
Wow.
so, like, things like that, I mean, and I even saw one of a top tier women's collegiate head basketball coach at the Division I level stayed silent for probably a week or two, and one of her former student athletes who's now in the WNBA said, look, I'm just going to straight up call you out. And she like tagged her and said, why have you said nothing when you represent these student athletes and your life is better off because of them? And eventually, I mean, it took a couple days, but eventually this coach did get back. But then for me, it's like, should you have to pull it out of people if it isn't there? And again, like, I talk to my friends about this. You know, I support that. I'm still going to talk about it, but it's like, you should know who I am in that sense, even before I have to make a statement about it. And so for those people who you have to wonder, it's like, I don't know, it's a tough situation, but I just feel like we've learned more than ever that now is the time to use your voice, and especially utilize those leadership skills and the platform that you possess in order to try to make this a better place, because who are you not to? Like, the first step is recognizing the injustices, illuminating and informing what is going on in these issues. And the second part is caring. Like, you have to take action for positive change, and you have to actually care. And so if you're just the coach who's like, okay, I've seen part one, but I don't know if I can, get to part two. It's like, look who you're representing,
It's such a weird thing. And like you said, the people that got out in front of it early, were kind of looked at as like, hey, this is kind of how you do it. And, you respect that. And then the people that were staying silent, it's either for two reasons. One, because they don't want to cause any, they don't want to basically bring more attention to themselves in this situation. And then if you don't say something, what does that say? And, I know specifically in our area, the different schools in our league, they were being patient with their responses, and people and students were having unrest and understand, hey, where's your statement at? And that is, it's just a tricky thing. And you put yourself out there because what's the right thing to say? You don't really, but I think you put it in the best way possible. And that is, recognizing the unjust nature of what has been going on and empathizing with it as well, and just being supportive. If you do those three things, you really can't go wrong. But people can look at you a little sideways if you took 2.5, 3 weeks to even make a statement. Even a week later, it was like, hey, where are you at? So it's just I think people do need to say stuff. At this point, it's too late, and we're filming this on June 10th, and this will probably air at the end of the month. But just want to see people's heart, and if you don't, and if you don't know their heart before then that's the real problem, because you haven't created those relationships that are meaningful, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like you said, empathizing, and just like, it doesn't have to be performative. And I feel like we're in this aspect too, where like people are, and I saw a tweet about this and I was like, this is so true. Like, the mission statement photo is eerily close to the protest photo. So like, just be aware that like, if you're putting yourself into something and you're like being performative in a way that's like, look at me doing this. Yes, it's good to show that you're supporting and you're doing all that you can and you're being active. But at the same time, you're not the one that's going to fix everything, you can't just place yourself as like, okay, now I'm here and it's all going to be better kind of notion. It's like, okay, this is going to be for the long haul, and I'm going to be paying attention to who's still talking about this and supporting and sharing information and doing whatever they can and having those conversations down the line, like a month, 2 months, like 3 months, until, we have the justice that people are seeking.
Right. Pivoting just a little bit, Everybody in their life has different trials or struggles that take place, and some can be really debilitating. Others you kind of learn from, and then you're formed because of that. You're stronger because of that. You had an unfortunate situation, with your mom passing at an early age. Tell me about that and how it's kind of, how, number one, how difficult it was at that time, and I'm sure you're probably still going through it. But how have you been able to come out of that and be the person that you are, that is so positive, so hardworking, and just got a great outlook for life?
Yeah, well, I think at the time, like, it was even hard to understand. I was 13, and it was just like I was in eighth grade, and it was in the middle of my basketball season. And even the fact that I remember that too, because it was so minuscule at the time, but it was like, it makes me think also and be like, I hope this never happens to anyone again. Like, I can't imagine it, like, watching a 13, I like empathize for my dad, even like having three kids and having to empathize and, have a 13-year-old have to go through this because my mom did die by suicide and I was the one to find her. And so it's just a lot of trauma was packed into that entire situation at a young age. And so it was just difficult, like, being really vulnerable here. Like, I used to have nightmares. I used to, bounce around from therapist to therapist just because I couldn't find a fit. It's things where you're also going through puberty, you're going through high school, you're going through a bunch of milestones in a short amount of time, and your mom isn't there. Like, I remember I had braces at the time when my mom passed away, and she never even got to see me, without braces. And she like would always, because I had them for like 3 years, just like a funny aside, which I guess is a long time to
Yeah.
have braces. I guess didn't get the best teeth, but then she would always be like, "Oh yeah, like can't wait to actually get those off. Like that's gonna be awesome." And little things like that, where it's like it's silly, but at the same time, like it's an aspect of her seeing me now, where I'm like, it just would have been great to have her there for so many of the milestones, like proms, homecomings, even basketball games, graduations. Like she didn't even see me graduate eighth grade. And so like I think about all that has happened in the past like 10 years. And again, like I could be really sad about it and be like, she missed out on this, this, and this. She never met these people who are still so important to me in my life. Like she didn't get to experience this with us. But like the way that I think, and someone wrote this on a birthday card that I got. My birthday is exactly 2 months after the anniversary of my mom's death. And
Wow.
they wrote, "Don't ask for a lighter load, but a stronger back." And I think for me, like at that age too, and in that moment, I was like, I can't sit here and just like mourn. Like, yes, you have to grieve, and like, yes, you have to go through all of that, and like, yes, it's still going to matter and be sad. Like, I still think about her all the time, but it's
Yeah.
like in that moment, I was like, I am not going to ask for a lighter load. I'm going to ask for a stronger back. And so for me, it was never like, woe is me. It was like, no, like I'm going to lean on my faith right now. I'm going to get into this because I know that God's got me. My mom was also into her faith. She loved this poem called Footprints in the Stand, where it was about, when you saw only one pair of footprints, that was God carrying you. And so things like that really helped me cope and get through. And even to this day, like journaling is huge for me. And just, again, I think it instilled an appreciation for life and for people. And I hate to just use it as like a lesson in that way because it was so much more than that. But she helped mold me into who I was. Even she was so independent. She was passionate about what she did. She like lit up a room with her smile and people just wanted to like be around her and gravitated towards her. And so it was like I tried to take that fun loving aspect that I knew so well as a kid and combine it with like that kind of, excuse my language, but badass woman kind of angle of, hey, like you can be fun and professional. You can achieve your dreams and still be like personable and be around people and care about the ones you love. And I mean, so much to take away from it, but I truly believe that I would not be who I am today without any of that.
Unbelievable story. Like I got chills, just hearing you talk about that, because it takes somebody with great strength to overcome those sort of things. I just couldn't even imagine at being at that age, and just how innocent you were at that time, and just going through that. entire process. What was it like for your father? Because, he had the love of his life one day, and then the next day he doesn't. And then on top of that, he's got to be there for, three growing kids in that moment. And at that point, it's like he can't give up, although, I'm sure it was extremely debilitating. But tell me, what was it like for him?
Yeah, well, I don't want to speak for him, but this brings out one instance in particular. I remember I straight up asked him, it was like a year or two or three later, and it was the anniversary, and we always try to do something on that day where either we hang out as a family. One year we donated blood together, like something we try and do something. And so we were out to dinner and we started talking about everything. And I was like, Dad, like, did you ever think about like giving up on us? Like, which was like a really deep question. But I remember like in my childhood, like that instilled a fear in me when my mom died that like everyone I love is just going to leave me.
Wow.
Which sounds really sad, but when someone decides to end their life, that's a question that goes through your head. Like, was I not worth being around, or like, was I too like so many questions that again are negative thoughts that you have to reframe in your own brain to be able to get through those things. But I remember straight up asking him, I was like, is that something you ever thought about? And I'm
Wow.
sorry to ask. And he was like, no. He's like, you know what I did? As soon as that happened, I went to the doctor and I made sure that I was healthy and that I was able to take care of my three kids that I knew needed me. And he was like, it was the opposite mindset. I was like, I need to make sure that I am the best possible person I am for my three kids right now. And like he's literally one of the best people I know. And I'm not just saying that because he's my dad, but like I can't imagine having to like I remember he tried to pack me a lunch once in high school and he packed me like gushers and egg roll and like rice or popcorn or something. And I was like, you know what, he's trying. Like he has literally no like that was always my mom's job or like we would just figure it out. But things like that where I'm like it was never lost on me how hard he tried, and I know it had to have weighed on him and the guilt he must have felt. But that's the thing about mental illness as well is like you never know what's going on in someone's head, no matter how close you are, no matter what's going on. And I like even if you're, I'm sorry to say it, but if you're married to someone, if you're with someone, even if it's a family member that you're related to, you never truly know. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations and let people know, because normally it's the strong people or the strong friends that are the ones that may struggle. And so I think it just also showed how important it was to him as well. Like, look, this is the time to be there for each other, this is the time for support, and it's not the time for me to make it about me. And so like I said, he's just a great guy. I wouldn't again be who I am without him either. Like when I graduated from college, I remember when I wanted to go to Marquette, he was like, "We cannot afford Marquette," and I was like, "I'm going to figure out scholarships. I'm going to figure out something." I was like, "I want to do this." And when I graduated, I was like, "This is for him." Like
Wow.
100%. So, and he was like bawling his eye, like it's even like getting me remembering this. Like he was crying and he was like, I just can't believe this. And I don't know, it's like being able to have him in my life and like see him like beaming at what I do almost, I don't want to say makes up for my mom not being here, but he has enough for two parents at the moment.
Wow. I mean, it just goes to show you that God only gives you what you can handle. And, obviously he was equipped to handle that situation, not backing down, staring at, right in the eyes, like, hey, it's time to go. And it's time for me to lead my family. And just show them that we can be okay, although this is, the worst thing that probably could happen to us in our lifetime. How'd your brother and sister handle it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was very close with my brother growing up. So he's 4 years older than me, and my sister is 6 years older. So she was in the midst of her freshman year of college. My brother was a senior in high school, and I was in eighth grade. So, like, kind of tough times, like, for a transition, let alone a life event to happen. And so I think for them, like my brother played in his high school basketball game like the next day or two and dropped like 15 points or something. And I remember we all went and it was in downtown Milwaukee. And I was like, even watching that, like I think that's what I take away from it. I don't know how they felt, but I know that they really carried it well and in a way where I looked up to them and I was like, wow, like and not that I like look to my sister as like a motherly figure, but she definitely had like a little bit of like, okay, now Jenny, like, let's do this. And she's a mom now, which is crazy, and has a kid, and she's pregnant with another one on the way. And it's like, I look back and I'm like, I don't know, they just were great role models, even in the midst of so much going on. And so again, credit to them, because I wouldn't even be who I am without them. And my brother went on to play college basketball. My sister ended up, getting married and having kids, and now she's moving into a house. And so it's like life just kind of happens. But like the way, again, that they carried it and got through it was even inspiring to me. Of like, look, like there's a blueprint and a path for like how you can do this. It doesn't have to look the same, but you can still do the things that you want to do, and you can still be successful in what you put your mind to.
Right. Now, your sister's first child, is it a boy or a girl?
A boy, Tucker. So he's 1.5, and like I said, she has another one on the way. But he's like my favorite little nephew. He's got like
Yeah.
a little mini basketball hoop. He calls me JJ because he can't
Okay.
say Jenny.
Yeah.
So he's a little cutie. But again, kids are like a good reset for like, they're just innocent. They like teach you to just like let things roll off your back a little bit and like have fun. Although, they can also be the opposite, I guess. But
Yeah.
yep.
Awesome. I love kids. I've got two myself, and just bring so much joy. It's a lot of work for sure, but they do bring you so much joy. Uh, switching topics just a little bit. Tell me about your experience, because you were doing the digital media for the NCAA. You've got to interview a bunch of different people. You've got to be in front of the camera as well as behind the scenes. Tell me about your experiences really doing both.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most visible part is always the on-camera stuff. Like that's what people maybe see and know me for. But like you mentioned, it's a lot of behind the scenes as well. Like I ran the NCAA soccer account even in the fall before transitioning into women's basketball, which was like, I don't think a lot of people knew that, because I'm not as passionate about soccer as I am about basketball. So I also just didn't talk about it as much. But like
Sure.
that was a beast within itself of figuring out a strategy, creating all the graphics, doing weekly highlight mixes and clips and video editing. And it was a lot of different stuff, but it was great. But for women's basketball, that was like the bread and butter, what I enjoyed the most, what got me out of bed in the morning. And so highlight of that was, I mean, the women's basketball road trip we did, where I did get to interview like over 200 of the top women's college basketball coaches and players. And
Wow.
just even meeting those people, like I don't think I realized at the time, like the scope of how cool that concept was, and the fact that like I was just talking to Kelly Graves like a couple weeks ago, the head coach at Oregon, and I'm like, the fact that like it even instilled like relationships or people that want to help me. He reached out to me when he saw that I was no longer going to be at the NCAA, and he was like, I want to help you find your next move. And just that's, again, like you learn that sports is a people business, because
Right.
you want people on your team in your corner that are the right people, and people who want to help you grow and just see you succeed, and wherever they can assist, they want to throw you a lob. And so I think it was just really cool in itself to like meet these people, pick their brains. Like I have the most like random stories in my pocket from that. Like Gino over at UConn, like just like talking about how this is never how he imagined his career to go. He was like, oh, I thought I was gonna, coach women's for a little bit, I guess, and then like leave UConn because there's no way we could ever like create a winning program there. So like I was just imagining that. And then he was like, but no, then like we won, and then we won again and again, and they kept winning these national championships. And I'm like, he makes it sound so much easier than I'm sure it was. But just moments like that, or like Kim Mulkey at Baylor, like her kid, her daughter Mackenzie has a kid, I should say, named Cannon, and he like crawled into her lap in the middle of our interview, and I was like, I just love this. Like the most pure moments, like you can't beat meeting people face to face and talking to them, getting to know them,
Right.
hearing their stories. And like, again, like Kim Mulkey told me about how her first taste of success was when she was 12 years old and she won a skating competition.
Hmm.
And I was like, who would have ever like put that together? And that's not something where I had a direct question for it, but that's another like interview tactic that I absolutely love, is like, you can research all you want, but like the best part is when you get people to reminisce or talk about a moment or talk about how they felt like in those things. Because you'll find out, like, again, like just asking Gino, is this what you pictured? And he was like, no, not all. I was supposed to be out of here 30 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
again, I'm sure it could have been asked by anyone else, but for me, like, I don't know, I really enjoy crafting questions to get the person out of like those milestones or those stat lines or whatever it is, because like it's like you or me, it's just someone experiencing something. And a lot of these coaches, again, what resonates with me is like they're just grateful. They're like,
Right.
it could have been you see some people coach in high school for 25 years and they never become a head coach, or they never, they have these like I guess like they're maybe people who are trying to get to the next level or trying to do that. And instead, like, some people stay in high school for 25 years. Some people stay as an assistant coach in college for their entire stint. And it's like, I remember one coach was just like, I don't even know how I'm here. Like, I treat it like a blessing every day. And
Right.
so again, a lot of stories, a lot of cool quotes, a lot of cool moments, but just getting to meet these people and now be able to like brush shoulders with some of them and talk to them is even better to like build that relationship.
The attitude of gratitude, so important. The majority of successful people have that sort of attitude where they're just so thankful for what they have, but always continuing to work hard. Speaking of your interviews, two-part question. One, I love the fact that you kind of just you have some blanket things that you want to get to, but then it's more conversational. Like when I first started doing this, this podcast, I'd write down, 20 questions about what was going on. Now I've gotten to the point where, all right, we have our pre-call. I got the information and we're just going to talk. I like that much better than when I had, regimented questions that I wanted to get to. And if I didn't get to something, then I'm looking like, what was the hardest part about on camera interviews for you?
I would have to say the fact that I was one rusty. Like I did that in college and I would do it for live basketball games. So like when you're live, it's so different than pre-recorded or even like I would consider this live, like
Yeah.
you're on the spot. Not that you can broadcast anywhere live, but it's like you're
Unless
on the
you
spot.
unless, unless you or I mess up too much, and then I can cut it. But no, you're
There you
right.
go.
I don't ever cut these. To your point.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it too. It's like if I can, I just like did an interview series with a bunch of women's college basketball players once we were entering the coronavirus stage. And even for that, like I was like, okay, now I can have notes on my screen so that it looks like I'm looking at them, even if I'm reading my notes, little things like that. But back to
Hmm.
the on camera part, I think one was being rusty, but two was just not knowing how people would receive me because they have no clue who I am. Like if I'm again, I was meeting Karen Aston at Texas, and I'm like, she's probably like, who the heck is this? Like, I'm not Maria Taylor, I'm not Holly Rowe, I'm not Doris Burke. And I think they're so used to, sometimes dealing with those people or with their own media or whatever. And it's like, who is this young girl who looks like she could be one of my players? Like, what is going on? So I think like, because again, there was one SID, a sports info director that was managing when we were going to do the interview with one head coach, and they were like, "Coach would like to know who will be interviewing her." And they were like, Jenny Fischer, and he just didn't respond. And I was like, that's because he was probably like, who the heck is that? Which is fair, but again, it's like I wanted to be able to connect with them. So like Kim Mulkey, for instance, at Baylor, before I even started talking to her, I was like, because she, again, high level coach, fresh off a national championship, has no clue who I am. Why should she give me the time of day? Because the guy set it up and said that she probably should, and it's the NCAA, so that carries more weight, of course. But still, I was like, hey, coach, when did you start playing? Even though I knew the answer, I said, when did you start playing again? Wasn't it the early 80s, like right when it was becoming an
There you go.
NCAA sanctioned sport? And she goes, yeah, I did. Like, yep. And I said, that's when my mom started playing. And she was like, where did your mom play? And all of a sudden she's interested in me and knows that one, I have connections to the sport. Two, I care about the sport. Three, I was raised by someone who cares about the sport, just like how her daughter is on her staff. So like I came into this knowing that. It sounds kind of sneaky, and I don't mean it in a sneaky way. It's like I want this person to believe that I'm going to care about what they have to say, that I'm going to help elevate it and make it matter, and that I know what I'm talking about. Because again, if you're sitting down from a stranger, like you have no clue what you're getting into until you start talking. So
Right. And that's a great point, because the curiosity is huge at what I've found. And if you're just naturally curious about the other person, it opens up so many doors to the conversation, and then it never really gets stagnant because you're curious about, finding out more about them. And in turn, Kim was now curious about you and your upbringing, because you actually did do some research on who she was, and not just answer the in the box questions that everybody asks. Coach, what happened in the second quarter? It looked like you guys, and then the coach is going to give you like this answer. It's like, yeah, we got stagnant, got in foul trouble, took some bad shots, and yeah, we got to play better defense. And you're
Right.
like, and
And
anybody can get that stuff.
that's where I'm like, sometimes people view like what I've done as like feature reporting, right? Which like I totally understand, because I'm not always talking about the X's and the O's. I still know basketball I would literally argue that I could be on a staff and I would be able to like help coach. Like, I don't think I could be a coach, but like I have like that background knowledge and like growing up with it and watching all these games and being immersed in it. It's like, I just feel like, and playing, like I've learned from the coaches that I've had as well. But like, you go back to like the genuine curiosity, like Chris, even when we started this call, I was like, that's a cool shirt. Like, I wonder what his shirt means. Like things like that, where like, now I'm going to ask him for the answer. But like,
Yeah,
even me like, doing these things, I'm like, I want to ask questions. And like,
for sure.
I think it's great what you're doing. And that's just a great point about being naturally curious, because once you have that curiosity and like that care for like that person, you just learn so much.
And then, specifically for women, sometimes when you're in a male dominated field, it's very difficult for you to get that instant credibility. And I just, in doing, one of my previous podcasts with Kevin E. Martin, she's talking to Mike Mayock. I think I told you in our previous call, but she's talking to him, but she gets instant credibility, not because she's a woman, but because she's knowledgeable about the sport. And she's like, I noticed you guys you guys do a cover 2 look on third downs. And then it's like, wait a minute, how did you know that? And that's because you didn't skip steps. And whatever you're doing, don't skip steps. It's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to bite you in the long run if you're not putting in the work. Is getting in the reps, and just feeling it out. But you're never going to be able to accomplish what you want if you constantly. I'm just going to jump here and I'm going to skip steps and things like that. You talked about behind the camera earlier and being a storyteller. I love good storytellers. You're a terrific one, and just watching some of your pieces. But tell me about the art of storytelling. What makes a good story?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I was actually I picked up this book that I've had for a long time that I actually got in college from, it was like one of the first journalism classes I ever took. And again, a lot of credit for this, I feel like, goes to Marquette. Like, yes, as a kid, I was genuinely curious and things like that. But like, in terms of how to craft a story, I had at least 3 classes a semester that talked about this in different ways, in different avenues across different platforms, whether that's video editing, whether even in my theology classes, which this sounds crazy, but so Marquette's a Catholic school,
Mm-hmm.
so you're required to take theology, and I took a peace studies class. These classes that relate to social justice, to the Christian religion, the Catholic religion more specifically, but they have Christian options and things like that. So like even in my theology class, the shortest sentence in the Bible is Jesus wept. And some of the best stories are short, concise, and yet the most powerful. And in my peace studies class, it talked about like, how storytelling can help for justice. Like I did a paper on how sports combines with justice to be able to change the narrative of the story of even like society. So things like this, like I think about my time in college a lot and what I learned there, and I reflect on it a lot. Even with what was going on, I looked back at like papers that I still had from my peace studies classes, and like papers that I had, like readings that I had, that I was just like, these are really cool. And again, that genuine curiosity. But I think to make a good story, it takes being, and I've created like this little mantra myself. I should probably get it like copyrighted or something. But it's something where once I took everything that I learned in those classes, especially, I wrapped it together into, no matter what the story, no matter what the platform, it needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, it needs to be creative. And I don't think any one outweighs the other, but like some stories are just too long where people don't want to get to the end, or they bore you because they're not creative enough, or they're not clear. You don't know what. I like to be impactful in the way that I write or that I do things. Like if I'm going to say I didn't get the job, I'm going to straight up say I didn't get the job. I'm not going to be like, and then once I was sitting in my bed and then I got the phone call and I was dreading it. Like, no, I didn't get the job. So things like that, where it's like, that's kind of my brand of it. And I think you leave people surprises. I even did a video on this not too long ago, because I did a video on Tiana Mangakahia, the Syracuse women's basketball player who had breast cancer. And it's actually up for a Sports Video Group Award, which I'm really excited about, which I just found. But I was like, that's crazy to think about. And a Marquette alum who's now at ESPN, Jen Latta, she's actually one of the hosts for that show. And so excited to see where that goes, no matter what happens. But I didn't explain her for how I did it, because so many people were like, why'd you do this? Or like, how'd you do that? Or like, why did I feel something even? And I was like, look, like, I went through and explained every part. Like, even like the first shot was going to be her smiling and her bald, because that explains two things. How I first met her, she was happy. This is like the handshake shot, they call it. Right. And then the second part is, something's wrong. You perceive something as wrong because she is bald. And so it leads you into, her whole story, and even how you organize it, right? Every story has a beginning, middle, and an end. But how you weave it, and sometimes if you start in the middle of the action, it's called in media res, is like the weird Latin term for it, where you start in the middle of the action, that can pull people in. But like for that story, I wanted to start with her explaining that she's on a break from basketball because she wrote this nice testimony about it. And so, and again, like I'm a storyteller where it has to be about the person who made it what it was. It has to be the way that they would want it told. It has to do them justice. And it's just like, I feel, again, like I took bits and pieces of what I saw from other people. Like even like Sarah Spain from ESPN, I'm like, she does this really well in interviews. Like she doesn't ask surface level questions, even though some people feel like you have to. She was like, no, I was able to be like, so I know that this happened, but tell me about this part of it, because I feel like that would be hard. And things like that, where it's like, I still get her to talk about the whole thing, but the question is more concise. My brain just goes crazy about the storytelling, as you can probably see, because I'm thinking about a million different things, trying to balance them all visually, with audio, with written, like no matter what it is. And I'm just passionate about it. I mean, like I said, I just started blabbing about the 50,000 different things that start like going off in my head. But like, I think a good story at its root is clear, concise, and creative. And you can go any direction with that, is kind of the beauty of it.
Wow, I loved it. I learned so much during that little bit, and I didn't take any digital marketing or journalism classes like that in college, but I've dabbled in creating little videos on either on iMovie or Final Cut Pro or whatever it may be. But I generally like that sort of stuff. But it's so time consuming. I just don't have enough time to do it. We recently did a four-part documentary on our team this past year. One of the local media outlets for high school did it, called Get Sports Focus, and just kind of outlines in it. And it's just what those three things that you mentioned. You said, well, concise, and what were the three things you just mentioned?
Clear, concise, and creative. So it's like the 3 C's, basically. Yep.
Yeah, so those three things were included, and it would have been a totally different story than I told. But when they gave us the rough cut, I'm like, hey, I like it because it was a good story, and it didn't have a great ending because the season ended, but it told the truth on what actually happened. And it was just really cool to see how that all played out, because there's just so much stuff that you can include or not include. I just don't even know where you go from it. We just watched Becoming on Netflix with Michelle Obama. That was pretty cool. That's a great story. And just, it's kind of like The Last Dance, where it goes present tense and then it goes back. And so, it tells that kind of story. So I just love it. I mean, it's so fascinating to me, and I can see why you're so into it, because it's so many different levels to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an art, and even like documentary style in itself. Like when I was watching The Last Dance, I was like, this is totally different storytelling than what I've done, but like that must be like a beast within itself to like figure out how we, exactly like you said too, like what to include and what not to. Like when I was doing the Tiana piece, I had to list out my must-haves. I was like, I cannot sacrifice these moments or these clips or these quotes. So like I had to make that list to be like, all right, it's a 6-minute video, but I have probably 2 hours worth of footage. So time to just completely, and it's like, I don't think people felt like they didn't get the full scope, but I was like, I could have made that video a half hour if I wanted to. So
Right. Yeah, that's got to be a difficult thing for somebody creating a documentary like that, or even a story, because sometimes, like, if you're on a network, if you're on ESPN, for instance, you might have a 90-second story that has 50 hours of footage and so many different layers, and you have to be able to get your clear message across and complete it. I don't even know how you do something like that.
No, it's completely an art. And like as a storyteller who like, this is also like, I believe a character flaw in myself. I care a ton. Like if I'm talking to someone and I'm interviewing them, like I care about them. Like Tiana, like afterwards I was like, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need water? Like what can I do to like help? I just took an hour of your time and you're in the middle of chemotherapy. Like what can I do for you? Things like that, where it's like, I care about the person and their story beyond the hour of me sitting down with them. And so it's kind of a character flaw because you can never include all of the stuff I want to, or the things that I think are also important that were little moments. Like, so it's an art. It's very interesting to do, but to figure it out and do it right there's a million different ways. So it's just up to the storyteller, which is also the good part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're getting ready to wrap it up, but I'm glad we brought you on because, in a few years, you're going to be a huge star and you won't want to come on the show anymore. So I'm glad we got you early. But give me, so this is the speed round. Give me 3 fun facts about yourself that nobody would know.
That nobody would know. Oh gosh, I'm kind of an open book, but I'll try to make it quick. I believe I'm left-handed in golf. I've never dyed my hair. People think I dye my hair. I've never dyed my hair. And if I could be a professional basketball player, I would.
Is D Wade your favorite basketball player of all time?
I would say yes, again, just because I grew up watching him. But then as I started going on, like I used to really like Chris Paul for some reason. I did like a project on him in a class. I loved Candace Parker growing up. And like, again, I got to do like, she got to be a part of an interview that I was doing with the student athlete. We like surprised the student athlete and Candace Parker hopped in and I was like, I'm even starstruck. And like, So I think there's a wide range, but I would say D Wade is probably a favorite. I'm also a LeBron fan.
Me too. I like them both. Who is your favorite interview?
I've done a lot. Honestly, at the moment, I'm going to have to say Tiana, just because she was super open and vulnerable in the position that she was in, and we got to produce what I thought was a great story out of it. So at this present moment, I'll say Tiana, but I will definitely say that I've had a lot of really interesting interviews. I'll also note Gino. I just thought he was super personable and honest, and like I see how he gets like recruits to like be able to buy into him and how he can figure out what they want. Like just like when you see inside someone's mind, like and like their heart a little bit in an interview, that's how I judge them as a favorite.
Wow, I love it. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, we're happy to have you on because you're going to be a superstar here and everybody's going to know who you are, whether that be in front of the camera or behind the scenes. But you just appreciate you sharing your story. You're so inspirational. It's gonna help a lot of people. So thank you, Jenny.
Well, Chris, thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great storytelling, and obviously as a coach, you're doing big things as well. And so I just think that none of that can really go unnoticed, and that I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond the Buckets podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share the show with your friends. And until next time, take care.